Hello and welcome. My name is Martin Brynskov. I am from Denmark. I am from the Technical University of Denmark, where I'm a researcher at a group called Connecting Communities at the Department of Computer Science. I'm also the founding director of a global network of cities and communities called OASC, or Open and Agile Smart Cities, which is also present in Japan. I'm very glad to be speaking today about urban digital twins, or as we call it, local digital twins, and both the technical parts and the non-technical parts that are necessary in order to use these technologies to achieve our societal goals around social development, planetary balance, and also economic development. I come always with a local perspective on the global issues, and this will be the topic of my talk today. In our group here at DTU, in the Connecting Communities group, we have a mission. We want to connect communities at any scale. Now, what does that mean? It means to provide the both physical and virtual testing and experimentation facilities for models at any scale along the computing continuum. We want to do this in our university, in our country, in our global region, which is Europe, and globally. So what we especially focus on is how models can work across different scales, from the very local to the bigger, maybe urban scale, or country scale, or continent scale, or globally. We base some of this on minimal interoperability. We call the field place-based computing, and we are responsible for quite a sizable number of actions, which both on the implementation side, innovation side, and on the research side makes us more knowledgeable about the possibilities. We also focus a lot on standardization. What I want to talk about today is actually how it's possible to understand and also act on all of these levels. It's possible to work, of course, from the top down with policies, with legislation, with global agreements, with investments. But it's certainly also just as important to work from the bottom up. So we call this approach top up, because it takes the best from both sides. A strong policy framework, a strong set of targets, but also a hard focus on how to implement in reality on the ground. I will give an example today from my home country and my hometown of Aarhus in Denmark, and where we zoom in on one neighborhood and how it is possible to make it energy positive. First, I just want to mention that in Europe, as a global region, there are some overall targets set by the European Union. And these are divided into some political goals to support our democracy, some rules, which is legislation, to support the implementation and guide the practical work, to ensure that the technologies we put out are safe, but also efficient. Then underlying this, there is investments in the cutting edge technologies to support the societal goals. As part of the digital decade, there is what is called the Digital Decade Compass, which sets some specific targets to reach by 2030. An important part of this is that there should be enough human resource skills in order to use these technologies on all levels. This also means on the citizen level. There is a need for the relevant infrastructure, certainly connectivity, but also what we call cloud edge nodes, which is a distributed set of small data centers, if you will, which can deliver the capabilities, the models, the actual infrastructure of the local digital twins close to where it is operating. Then the businesses must, of course, be taking up these new technologies, such as AI and data-driven processes, and especially the smaller companies is a big focus. Then on the public side, on the governance side, all key public services must be available online. Everything from getting a new passport or applying for some service, that must be supported on the mobile and online. Of course, with the option to opt out if for some reason it is not convenient for a citizen to be using the digital services. All health records should be online and the digital identity should be a backbone. These are some very overall goals, but actually they're not so easy to achieve in practice. I'll show you a couple of examples on how this is done. The first thing I will show is called BIPED, Building Intelligent Positive Energy Districts. And this is a picture from where it is happening. It is, as I said, the city of Aarhus in Denmark. It's the second city and the largest commercial port in Denmark, and also recently nominated as the happiest city in the world. In this city, there is a strong focus on climate neutrality, and the Positive Energy District, PED, is a very important element in achieving these goals. There are three big sectors which are the main contributors to the carbon emission in a city like Aarhus. The buildings, both that are being created but also operated, they should be renovated in order to ensure that the buildings are as efficient as possible. This also means the creation of new buildings. Transportation and mobility is a very, very big part of the emissions. So electrical vehicles becoming part of the grid, as well as public transportation being electrified, is also a very big component. Third, it's very important that the energy production, for instance, for heating, is made by renewable energy, and finally, that it can be balanced to fit the demand. Demand is sometimes possible to make flexible, at other times it's not possible to make it flexible. But we need to be able to balance the grid in order to at least optimize for the consumption in a weather-based system where sun and energy from wind and other renewable sources are a basic component. As I said, this happens in the city of Aarhus, in the district of Brabrand, and in a neighborhood which is called Gellerup. In Denmark, people would immediately recognize this as a neighborhood which has historically had many problems. Problems of social character, of economic character, and also because of the building stock of climate character. So it is a very, very interesting example of where it's possible to make change towards positive energy district. The city of Aarhus has set the target to be carbon neutral by 2030. That is not so easy. There are some obstacles to becoming climate neutral. First of all, safe testing of innovative solutions for critical urban systems is not something you can just play around with. You cannot just shut them down if a new idea doesn't work. It has to operate around the clock, around the year. So how to combine the safe testing with the continuous operation is an issue. Scaling from one district to the rest of the city, but also the rest of the country, and so on, is actually a very difficult question. Getting everyone on board is very important. The citizens, the politicians, the businesses, everybody need to contribute and have a positive attitude towards the climate goals. This is in itself a very important part to be inclusive in getting to these goals. Then finally, a very big contribution to the carbon emissions is not controlled by the municipality itself. It happens outside. And this is what we call scope 3. How to ensure that scope 3 emissions are also reduced. It's a very big obstacle. So what is being proposed now very, very concretely and operated in this district is to have a data-driven, intelligent, interoperable, multidisciplinary, and highly scalable, as well as resilient and policy-ready solution. Policy-ready means that the politicians can decide, backed by the citizens and the businesses, to implement, and that the implementation is ready to work in operational reality. And finally, that the results are predictable. So this is quite a challenge, but it's also possible, we think. One of the very fundamental issues, and this is the last slide presenting this case, is to ensure that these models work across different scales, both different scales of geography, time and space, from the very local building or intersection to the district, to the city, to the country, to the continent, and so on, but also in complexity, where you combine different systems. It could be electricity, district heating, mobility, but also the wider socioeconomic surroundings. This is the key and what we will try to address and also describe. Overall, this is how the abstract technology vision looks like. This graph explains where data comes from different sources in the data platforms. High velocity, low velocity, could be IoT sensors, or it could be register data, which is then on the next level collected in what in Europe is being called data spaces. Data spaces is a technical infrastructure with a strong governance around, both on the rules on putting data in and taking data out. Data spaces can be put together on the local level, on the national level, and now is also being established on the European level. We have the data space for particular sectors like energy or mobility or other more well-described sectors. And then we have the data space for smart communities, which cuts across. When we have data established on a good foundation of technical sound infrastructure and good governance, we can start delivering these services. And that means we can have digital twins, which are models on different scale and different complexity of phenomena in the real world. We can have them in operational mode, or we can have it for simulation or training. And we can build the toolbox of building blocks, which is necessary to operate these decentralized networks of local digital twins. And on the other hand, we can also operate artificial intelligence, analytics, and robotics solutions based on the data and the models that are established. And on top of that, it's possible to simulate and visualize in the metaverse, or as it's called in Europe, the cityverse, the citizen-verse, where citizens and companies, they meet the digital reality. And at the intersection of these different types of services is an approach we call minimal interoperability, and a specific set of mechanisms in Europe called MIMS Plus and globally called MIMS that enable a minimal but sufficient link and interoperability between these different levels and also different systems. I will now explain in a little bit more detail how these data spaces are created in order to make the foundation for the digital twins. In Denmark, which is part of the European Union, there is what we call a balanced market approach. That means that there is a target to have a balanced regulation, not too little regulation or too much regulation, but a good balance of just enough but sufficient regulation of new technologies. One very important point to emphasize is that the public investment is a very big part of the economy. So the market is actually also influenced a lot on the investment from the public side. This graph shows the relationship between subnational government spending as a percentage of overall GDP, so the size of the economy of a country, and then the size of the government spending. And as you can see here, countries like Denmark, like Canada, like Belgium, also some other European countries, China, have a very high both percentage of the subnational government expenditure as part of the economy, and also the public sector being very much influenced on what is spent on the local level, on the municipal level, and on the regional level. Japan is in a similar situation where the investments from the local level make up quite an important part of the overall economy, and certainly a very important part of the public investments. This is why it's so important to ensure that the investments made from the public side and also the local public investments, they have an innovation mindset, that they are being directed towards the evolution of how our societies evolve and use these new technologies in a good way. Many attempts have already been made to trial in practice and how to do this. I show here some examples, mainly from Europe, and many of them have been collected in the Living in EU initiative, which is all the European municipalities coming together with the European institutions and companies to see what have we learned. There's also very good learnings on the global level as part of the United Nations United for Smart and Sustainable Cities initiatives, and I'll mention this also a little bit later. If we take the combined learnings of all of this, what we're transitioning from is the old world where governing happens in silos, and also where the platforms and the records, the data, which has been there for centuries, is very fragmented. That is probably for a good reason historically, but as these new technologies arrive, we have some new opportunities, and with those opportunities, also some new challenges. So combined, what we are moving towards is moving away from governing in silos till having governing and governance as a platform. Of course, it has to happen on a legal basis, on a trustworthy basis, and on an efficient basis. So we cannot just mix all data and then start operating. It is not safe. It is not the right way to govern, we think. But we need some ways to have some shared platforms, some controlled trust and consent when sharing, and the opportunity to build models around these data and deliver services that are efficient and safe and helping us reach our policy goals on the social side, on the environmental side, and on the economic side. As an example, to summarize some of these learnings, I just want to show or point to this report that was created by the Danish Standards Institution with 7 simple principles as suggestions on how to move forward. And the first one is called Focus on Data. You are free to download this. It's available on the Danish Standards website. But I want to then go into a little bit more detail on how do we then do this in practice. You can see recommendation number 2 is build with interfaces, and 3, secure a minimum of interoperability. And that actually encapsulates what is a data space. So this is a very simplified model of how to make a data space as it has been envisioned in the European Union. First, it has to be scoped, and I showed many of the examples of what had been done before. Then it is synthesized and put together in a blueprint. That blueprint is then validated on a quite large scale. And with those learnings, it is put into operation, both with legislation, which is suggesting how to organize data, and infrastructure, how to operate. And the infrastructure in this case is operated what is called a European Digital Infrastructure Consortium, EDIC. And the legislation in this case is, for instance, supported by a new act that has just been approved, the Interoperable Europe Act. So with the legislation and the infrastructure operations, data spaces are now becoming a very concrete way to underpin and support the evolution of European society from the municipalities and all the way up. So a concrete example, and I welcome you to explore more on the website, is the European Data Space for Smart Communities, is the cross-sectorial data space. So it is the data space that combines energy, mobility, health, and everything else you can imagine when it comes together on the local level. It is already described as a blueprint, and now it is ready to be deployed in 10 to 12 fairly large-scale pilots. There's a total budget of 33 million euro, and it's both creating the data space and also evolving and improving the blueprint and the description of the data space principles. You can read much more about it on the website. What you can see when you dive into this data space for smart communities is that it's built on the vision I showed before, the data spaces being created with a technical and governance infrastructure in place. And on top of these, you can deliver both local digital twins, you can deliver AI testing and experimentation, which you can also find at the CitCom.ai website with much more detail. And you can, on top of this, build a metaverse or citizenverse to make it very tangible. So this is now becoming part of the European data space family of data spaces, where a lot of sectorial data spaces such as mobility, health, and energy, and many more sectors are being described. But the smart communities data space describes how we combine all of these sectorial data spaces. Much of the focus is on reaching climate neutrality goals, so part of the Green Deal, as it is called in Europe, but certainly embedded in social goals and economic goals. As said, there's a non-technical part and a technical part. I'm not going to go into details here, but just to mention to you that that it is quite important to have both. Just as important as having the blueprint and the pilots that will validate the blueprint, it is to have indicators to measure if we have reached the goals. as Lord Kelvin famously said, what is not measured cannot be improved. I'm not sure it's entirely true, but at least it gives an indication of why we need indicators. One very central attempt which has been made in Europe to assess the digital maturity of municipalities is the LAWDIMAS. Some of you may know the digital and economic societal impact DESI index for Europe, which gives an indicator for the digital maturity of all countries in Europe. LAWDIMAS is a self-assessment tool for all municipalities. It's focused on Europe, but it's free to use for all municipalities in the world. And it's freely available at the website lawdimas.espon.eu. Here you can self-assess the overall digital maturity, the governance, the service design, the data management, interoperability, service delivery, technology, and networking. And you can benchmark and score towards your own goals, but also to see how you perform against other cities. This is a very simple way. It is not giving all the answers to what you should do, but you can at least see an indication on what you have for potential to do more. And next to the indicator score, there's also a lot of examples of best practice where you can go and see, like the example I showed with biped in Aarhus, you can go and see in practice what have been done on the local level. So this is at least one attempt to give guidance on the evolution. There are other ways, and we are very aware and happy to be working with the Japanese efforts on indicators of well-being, because the goals are in fact the same, to create good surroundings for life, meaning the social part, the nature and climate part, and the economic part. And this, of course, focuses very much on the digital part. So hopefully they can together be complementary, and we can learn and share our experiences. One very important thing to say is that municipalities and cities are different. Some would want more to be waiting, to observe and to learn and see how the field evolves, while others are very eager to realize the latest learnings in practice. And there is no right or wrong. Aarhus, I would say, is very proactive and investing very much in realizing the ideas in practice as soon as possible, and also to share with others so others can learn with Aarhus. But there are all kinds of different roles that a municipality can take. Also in between roles where you maybe facilitate, you bring together some stakeholders and they can do some interesting work, or you set more direction from policy or in practice, or from citizens, you help other initiatives. So this is just to share some of the learnings that have evolved over many years. And these are the combined learnings from the Netherlands and Denmark, that there are these different possible roles of municipalities. Finally, I would like to share with you this report, which is available globally and endorsed by the 17 or 18 agencies in the United Nations around the initiative called United for Smart and Sustainable Cities. It is a very easily accessible report, which both describes the principles that you can work with, very much based on the Danish recommendations that you saw before, but also concrete ways to implement this minimal interoperability approach. And we are working with Japanese colleagues, Korean colleagues, global colleagues, in United Nations on the standardization, also together with other bodies globally, to ensure that the learnings that come from high resource areas such as Denmark are shared globally to learn together on how we best do this transformation of our societies, not just to become climate neutral, but also to have it in a socially balanced environment which fits our culture, while at the same time has a prosperous economy around it, also on the local level, which fills the need that we have historically, culturally, and for the future. So with this, I would like to thank you for listening. Feel free to reach out to me or to the colleagues, and we would be very happy to discuss further collaboration with you. Thank you for the invitation to come here.